There's different types of pressure on both sides right now. You know, the bottom bracket is kind of fighting for their BlizzCon spot, whereas the top is fighting for that better seeding, try to fight for that better seeding. So it depends. Method NA had a rock day yesterday. I mean, they were great. They had one bad map, I would say, and the rest of it was just, you know, just some of their best performances that we've seen all season, despite, you know, their concerns, some concerns that maybe they didn't practice enough.
Without a doubt, and 75% in favor of the Magic Men, with Abracadabra having the huge amount of votes going in for them. Let's see how they do and how their opponents do in the Underrot.
Abracadabra, Method NA, the first time we've seen them face each other in the upper final in any of the 2 seasons at all this year. So right off the bat, aggressive pull here for Abra, grabbing everything together at the top on top of the Matron with a Bloodlust on top of it. Method taking it a bit slower and going down to the Mask with a Mask Stealth and then doing their big pull there, but no Bloodlust from them, Nagura.
Yeah, so they actually pulled the Patrol and on top of the Mask here, which is pretty dangerous because you have multiple Blood Priests here and the Matron on top of the Mask, and you have to interrupt all of those casts from the double Blood Priest, constantly casting those healing abilities, and the huge AoEs coming out of the Mask, plus the Matron just buffing all of the mobs around them with a haste buff, with this war cry that you see just now going off. So well done by Method NA to be able to do this without the Bloodlust usage. While Abracadabra is still working on their pool. Not completely sure if they mismanaged the Sanguine a little bit there. Either way, it took them a little bit longer than Method NA, but they also got the 17% compared to the 11.
There was a bit of mismanagement, so one of the Blood Priests actually ended up bathing in some of that Panini Cristini on the ground and just healing for like 40% HP, so they had to grip that out. So one of the advantages of the double Unholy DK here is not just, of course, the immense damage, but because we're in this Sanguine nature, you have an extra grip on your hands that you can help with situations like I just mentioned, where, you know, a mob is accidentally left behind, not bumped properly, bathing in Sanguine, whatever it may be. Nonetheless, both teams here on Elderly Axa right now as Method NA has her down to 60% and Abracadabra, I was about to say Method U because I'm so used to Method U being here, but Abracadabra 72% on Elderly Axa right now. You know, I don't think we've actually seen Underrot at all yet this entire weekend, so this is the first time we're seeing it. Now, it was a time trial dungeon, but these are some actually pretty nasty affixes, especially once we get to Kragma's room.
Yeah, most definitely. You have Necrotic being super annoying for the tank, as you see Divine Field actually dropping very low as one of the casts is going through from the boss here. Did manage to recover though, but had to use a lot of cooldowns to keep him alive. But yeah, the affixes in general, not only Necrotic is going to be a huge problem for the tank, and that's why both of them are playing Dwarf to have the Stone Form available to get rid of those stacks, but you also have Sanguine. So lots of the mobs that are in Kragma's room have different kinds of HP. You have the Living Rots having more HP than anything else, and then you have Lashers and Maggots, all of them having different kinds of HP. So the Sanguine management will matter a lot, especially since you only have the Ring of Peace and some single target grips coming in by the DKs. You don't have anything like a Typhoon, for example, from a Rastadruid anymore.
And yeah, you're absolutely right, but the second DK kind of helps just a bit. Really, yeah, exactly. So I was just about to say, really what it's going to come down to is killing the ads before that Sanguine triggers. I mean, this is an almost full room pull from Method NA here with the double Unholy DK trying to do some work. Shakibordi rocketing ahead, Lighty starting to catch up, and most of the trash starting to melt. Now they have to be really careful here with the Sanguine, but everything is dead at the same time. And that's exactly what I wanted to mention is Sanguine has that 1 second arming time. When it goes down, it doesn't immediately heal what's in it. So as long as you just kill everything within that second, not forehead this time, then you're good. And that's exactly what Method NA did. They pulled everything, and the Unholy DK just does so much damage that it just annihilated the entire room. Who cares about Necrotic? Who cares about Sanguine? Who cares about anything? Who cares about any mechanic?
What is life?
Or any affix, right? Who cares about life even when Unholy DKs just kill things before you even have to worry about it?
Yeah, that was just an insane pull coming out of Method NA here. They really just pulled, they got so much percentages just from just one pull that they did, and the trash just died in seconds even. It was just the insane damage coming out of Shakib and Laddie on that DK. Those pulls are usually very difficult just because the trash here is very dangerous. There's lots of casts that need to interrupt, and on top of that there's emissaries of Tide in these pulls. That means that none of these mobs are stunnable, interruptible, nothing like that. And you have the Maggots casting frontals, you have the Lashers casting the stun that needs the absorb that can't be interrupted. So that's why also Yoda is running human actually. So he's running that human racial to be able to get rid of the stun in case a Lasher cast goes through on him. And you also have them running the Mistweaver monks who can dispel the disease, which is the stun from the Lashers.
Yeah, it's funny. Usually this room takes a while and we talk about it just like you did. And we go, oh no, the Lasher got interrupted and we have the Swarmer going out and oh no, that person got low. And Method and is already on the boss. Everything's already dead. There's nothing to even talk about for them about Kragma's room being dangerous because they just deleted it from this instance. Kragma now down to 68% for Method and that sits at 59% trash. Usually we see teams in the high 50s, low 60s worth of percentage trash. Abracadabra doing just way more modest pulls here. They did pull the Guardians on top of the remaining trash here in Kragma's room, but I mean, this is just basically a third of the pull that Method and they did earlier. Two Unholy DKs on either side too, so you really tell that Method and they had this room much better practiced.
Yeah, I mean, they also didn't have the Bloodlust available for Abra because they did the bigger pull at the very start of the instance. So with Abra also pulling the skeletons here, they're going to be quite far ahead in trash actually. If you look at the percentages, 59 for Method and once Abra is done with this pull, they're actually on 71%. So it is it's a 12% difference between the two. So if there's some time they can make up later for Abra, because they don't have to pull as much trash as Method and Aid does. So there's some advantages that they have, but Kragma already being on 23% here for Method and Aid, and Abra just now pulling it.
Yeah, so I mean that's going to add up. But the thing is, trash to a certain extent is, I mean, it's obviously important. You need to finish the dungeon and run Fortified. But when you have so much power with two Unholy DKs, we talk about, oh no, how much 12% between the two teams. It's really not a big deal because with two Unholy DKs, you go, oh yeah, just pull an extra 12% on top of what we're already pulling. It doesn't matter if we cleave 15 targets or 25 targets. As long as we survive, it'll all die very quickly. So speaking of Death, Kragma here now down to 5%. So Method and they going to be finishing that up, and we'll see exactly what they do with the trash leading up to Sporecaller Zansha. Now, as far as the trash is concerned, you do need some babysitting because there are some emissaries of Tides present, and of course we have the Defilers present as well, which have several dangerous casts: Shadow Bolt Volley, the Withering Curse. So you need to be able to interrupt those. You need to be able to separate the Enchanted Emissary from them, and there's really just not as much prowess as you can take advantage of with the double Unholy DK as there is in Kragma's room, which they've already done. Kragma now down to 38% for Abracadabra. That sits at 71% trash. Method has of course dealt with Kragma and done a pull here with 59% trash.
Yeah, there's another thing to know with the Emissary of Tides is that neither team has a Rasta Druid. A Rasta Druid usually very nice to deal with the Tides because they can just constantly spam Entangling Roots on them, which only lasts for 8 seconds, but since there's no DR on them, they can just constantly recast a root. Now, Ring of Peace makes it so you can actually disconnect the Emissary of Tides from the Defilers or from another trash pack and just pull the Tides by its own, so that will definitely help them as well, but you can't pull a whole trash pack and just constantly see the Emissary of Tides unless you have your Rogue constantly sap it, which means that the Rogue can't do anything else other than sapping. So we'll see what they do with the Ring of Peace here instead of the Entangling Roots. Abra just now getting closer to downing Kragma, while Method and A at this point, they are on 71% trash too. So they caught up on trash and they're now pulling Sancha as well with the Ring of Peace, as I just mentioned here.
Yep, the Ring of Peace and two emissaries on top of Sancha. And whether those two emissaries dies, I'm going to largely expect that the two Defilers are going to be pulled on top of the boss after, and they do still have the interrupts to kind of attend to those double interrupts needed per Defiler. So as long as you assign one melee in the tank and then the other two melee to the second Defiler should be good. You can already see one of them marked with a green triangle there for them, so expect those to be pulled as soon as these Tides are done teleporting out of the dungeon. Mushrooms finally explode here for Zansha. Frontal for the Shockwave as well. Nerf does his best to try and point it towards some of the mushrooms, but he actually missed quite a few of them. Zmok, however, going down here on the side of Abracadabra. That's their second death in the dungeon, and they don't have the battle res to give him either, so he has to release and run all the way back right now while the rest of the team tries to finish off this pack with Sanguine going down. I'm not sure if they killed the Hazard Spaghetti there, and Divine Field ticking down from the Wicked Frenzy as well from one of the Guardians. I mean, this is not the Abra that we saw yesterday so far.
Yeah, this is a huge problem with... this first pull that they were doing here, this cost them a lot of setup time. They were seeing the Danger Noodle, and they had the Emissary of Tides come in at the same time while pulling the other Guardians on top. So it took them a while to set this pull up. And as soon as they had the setup happening, Smok went down immediately. And then because of the Emissary of Tides, they were not able to interrupt the Wicked Frenzy, and therefore Divine Field had the magic debuff because of the Enrage Wicked Frenzy that went off on one of the Guardians. And it's a magic debuff, so there's no way for Divine Field to get rid of it with the healer not not present, not being able to dispel it, and he just ticked down on top of the Necrotic. So huge problems for them. Thankfully, they didn't have a full team wipe, and they still managed to get most of the trash done, but they have 3 deaths on the board, and just costing them so much. While Method and A, they're on 15% on Sancha at this point, and they also pulled the 2 Defilers on top, so they're in 79% trash as well.
And well done with the Defilers there with a final bump from the Ring of Peace just as they're about to die to make sure to get the Sanguine pool away from the boss from Sporecaller Zancha. You don't want the boss healed in that nasty Sanguine on the ground. Abracadabra has started on Zancha now and is dealing with their 2 Emissary Tides as well on top of the boss. Now they're at 86%. I don't know if they're going to even bother or risk pulling the 2 Defilers that Method and A had to deal with. Method and A is done with the boss and is starting to head over to that more dangerous Guardian pack a bit further up front. Now, you know, part of the problem, we were discussing this earlier, Nagura, is it's nice when these big pulls come together. They look great. They're usually effective. But the problem is once you start taking too long to set them up, once there's too many moving parts, too high risk, at some point it's just more efficient to just brute force through it rather than have so many moving parts. You waste so much time. Everybody get in position, get tricks at the trade up. Is your CC ready? Are you good to go? And you just waste valuable seconds and all that set up for nothing in the end.
Yeah, this is something we constantly saw when we had Infected, for example, as the 4th affix with those Gahoonies. When you had the Infected mobs and people were running around trying to set up those huge poles, well, seeing the Infected mobs and getting the rest of them together. And it looks flashy and it looked really cool how they had all of these setup CCs and pulling the rest together. But in the end, they were just slower than some other teams who were brute forcing it, unfortunately, because of the fact that it took so long. Now, Method and A having a little bit of trouble with Sanguine here, as they actually pulled a Corruptor on top of all of those Guardians and the Defiler as well. So pretty huge pull coming in for Method and A. It only put them to 93%. Actually, 93% should be enough with the Emissary here. So they only have to kill the 2 Corruptors and the Emissary of Tides to get the 100%.
Yeah, that should be all they need right there. And I mean, they're just rocketing through this dungeon right now.
Yeah.
Everything, it's a perfect run, 0 deaths from them. Percentages should be perfect here just at the very end. Nice little ROP bump at the beginning just to separate the mobs a bit, get them against the wall for their first Abyssal strike as well. Sporecaller Zancha still 33% for Abracadabra. Now, Abracadabra has, I suppose, the advantage of the early trash in the dungeon. They only need 6% left, and that 6% is exactly what we're seeing Method and A do here. So all they're going to need to do is mass stealth, get on their mounts, mass stealth, and head over towards the exit. But Method and A is way too far ahead on this point, and as always, you know, we have to mention the fact that there's 3 deaths on the board for Abracadabra. That's an extra 15 seconds that this team needs to overcome Method and A by. So I don't think this one's happening anything short of a wipe for Method and A, which is just not going to happen because it's fortified. This is the remainder of the trash. It's not that dangerous as long as you move out of the Abyssal strikes on the ground, and the last boss, not a big deal.
Yeah, so this is a time trial dungeon, right? And Method and A was already faster than Abra in the time trials, even though their overall seed in time trials was lower for Method and A, and Abra beat them there. But obviously they get the #1 spot for Abra. But in this dungeon specifically, Method and A got the 3rd spot, and Abra got 5th in the time trials. Even though it was only 13 seconds difference between those two, but Method and A definitely seems like they even improved their strategy from the time trials. As they're, I mean, if you look at the final time right now, it's 12 minutes and 20, and their time trial time was 15 minutes and 11. And they will definitely finish this dungeon faster than they did in their time trial. So definitely showing that they practiced this dungeon even more because they were not happy with their time trial time.
And here they go with Bloodlust popped on the Unbound Abomination, rapidly filling up the energy bar. We always know, of course, the boss has energy filled instead of health. Spawns the blood effigies on either side. You kill 6 of them, you kill the boss. So here are the first 2 now, and they're actually almost about to fill the second bar as well. And just these fortified bosses at the player's gear level that they have here, and of course their skill is just, it's crazy how fast they die. Unbound Abomination is basically down to 33% health at this point already. Only a couple of rotting spores have spawned, and they're coming towards the group. And Abracadabra is just now killing the trash and getting access to this last boss.
Yeah, this is really just the positivity of having the DKs, right, with the Bloodlust. Now, DKs, if they don't have their huge cooldowns, then they're not going to do as much of a burst DPS as they do this time around. But if you save your army with the Bloodlust for these bosses like Unbound Abomination, you see just how fast they finish off this boss. The energy bar is almost full again, and then they're going to get the 2 last Blood Visages. They already spawned before the last ones were even dead, so just insane speed and insane amount of single target damage coming out of Method and A here. And when they finish off the dungeon, it's going to be just short of 14 minutes, so insane time as well. This would be the #1 time for time trials too.
I mean,
Don't worry.
I didn't even know what to say. No, I was looking around, and usually we kind of think of like, oh yeah, that was a really good run, but for this. But there's just nothing to say. That was just a flawless run. That was crazy in Kragmaw's room, record timing, and they just crushed it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've been seeing thus far this weekend out of Method NA in particular, is they have really stepped up, and in many cases it kind of just invalidates their time trials when every single dungeon, okay, they had one bad one yesterday or something like that, but every other dungeon they're just absolutely crushing here.
Yeah, and this whole entire week, just being able to use this double Unholy Death Knight to sheer success is also very nice. I know we've had some issues with, like, maybe they're not that great in Underrot, maybe Underrot's like their worst dungeon. However, with the double Unholy DK, it really seems like they're able to bring it home with just how big you end up pulling, because you just keep adding mobs until the pack is no longer dangerous. You see it from Abracadabra on their opening pull of the dungeon. That was an enormous pull that most of the time for most groups is just like not doable, just because of the sheer size, like all of those matrons charging around, all of the enrages that go out on the mobs. But then both of the teams are really neck and neck through the first boss, with Abracadabra having a little bit more trash count due to the sheer size of their first pull. But then Method NA comes through with this insane Kragmaw room that they do in, like Sloot said, record time. They just drop both of their Death and Decays, and you see the DK spike to the top, and then the damage is insane. It's also very nice to see the Mistweaver Monk gameplay from JB here. Mistweaver Monk is super strong in Underrot just because of stuff like that, because you're pulling packs of extraordinary size. Just the way the crane healing that grows out in the whole entire group is very nice, and it tops your whole entire group insanely quickly. And then Method NA is able to just take the match off of those really good proactive plays by them.
Yeah, and especially with both Mistweaver Monks running that Sunrise technique. So whenever they're spreading around, Rising Sun Kick is leaving that debuff, causing them to take more physical damage. So they'll be casting, they'll have Focus Thunders, they'll be having multiple back-to-back Rising Sun Kicks to be able to put out before they're having the Spinning Crane. So they're having lots and lots of extra damage going out as a result. But let's talk a little bit more about that routing in particular there.
Yeah, so Abracadabra actually had some issues towards the middle of the dungeon with Zamak going down, and part of it is because they ended up pulling, like, so for those of you who don't know, there's like these feral blood swarmers that will end up flying around. They ended up pulling one, and whenever it casts its Thirst of Blood on a target, it will end up like fixating onto them and then doing a massive amount of shadow and physical damage to them. It fixates on Zamak, and he ends up going down. Then Divine Field ends up getting this Wicked Assault caused by the Wicked Frenzy, which is actually spell reflectable. You can spell reflect the application of that magic debuff back onto the mob, which will pretty much instantly kill that Death Speaker. However, he doesn't get the spell reflect off, and after he leaps out of melee, he just ends up going down. And this pull, which was going to be very good for Abracadabra, falls apart very quickly because of that. So Zamak right there, he gets fixated. He's trying to heal himself, whenever in reality he should be just like trying to like ring a piece of mob off of him, maybe calling for a DK to get it to grip him off of it. They don't have any battle reses available, as you can see on the side of the screen, and that's where the pack starts to get very dangerous. Now Divine is getting pretty high on necrotic stacks, and you see that magic debuff coming through. It's right next to his necrotic stacks. He leaps out of the pack, but it's too little too late. Once you have that debuff, you need to either get it dispelled off, or you have to have already spell reflected it back onto the Death Speaker. But the pack is it's like a two-front issue. I think they may have been able to salvage it even with Zamak's death, but him dying right there is pretty much the end of it.
I think part of the issue with Abra, and I'm starting to notice a trend here, and I think you'll agree with me because we were just commenting, Abra seems to get, they're being a little too fancy sometimes. They're going a little too overboard. Think of Tol de Gore, right? They had that huge multi-access pull 2 weeks ago, and then Divine Field kept dying, and they put too many moving parts, and I think they're starting to suffer sometimes for just trying to overdo it. Grab a swarm from here, you got to spell reflect at the exact same right time. All these moving parts need to come together, and sometimes they don't. I mean, it's just risky, and I'm not sure if it's worth it, whereas Method NA didn't have anything overly fancy. They just brute forced the dungeon down.